The real plague is just the horde of boars, a boar horde, if you will.
They're the real enemy.
Toss them over the city wall.
Toss them into the Prussian camp.
Toss them all.
We're sending in Swine Team 6. Go.
Good.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Unbelievable, the podcast where I, the most stubborn train conductor east of the Mississippi, Kurt Danner, tell my friend, the greatest fox tosser the Holy Roman Empire has ever seen, Luis Mejia, two unbelievable stories from history, one of them being true and one of them being false.
And it's up to me to figure out which is which.
Luis, I think this is going to be a really fun one today. You know, I didn't really do this on purpose, but after I finished my research, I realized that both of these stories involve something very serious and major going on in the world, but we're focusing on some random people getting up to some shenanigans that are almost completely unrelated. And I think that's right in our sweet spot.
That's also how we tended to be when we lived together, Kurt. I mean, we really didn't care about what was going on outside of our four walls of the apartment. So I think this is going to hit close to home in a really nice way because as we are one to say, ignorance is bliss. Sometimes the people having the most fun across history are the people that are blissfully unaware of what's going on.
So true. We are big into the head empty lifestyle.
Oh, yeah.
But before we get to all that fun, Luis, have you brought a little fast fact to get us started off that might be true, could be false?
I do, Kurt, and it kind of offends me that you think I wouldn't have a fast fact for you because I'm one to do my due diligence on this podcast.
Oh, of course.
Yes, I'm one to do the most research out of anyone. But in any case, Kurt, yes, I do have a fast fact. So for those of you that don't know, we are recording this podcast we are right in the midst of the 2024 Paris Olympics. So here's the fact for today, Kurt. We know we love everything that's been going on with the Olympics ever since they got revamped in the 1890s back there in Athens. But, Kurt, we know these as the modern Olympics. We've always known these as the modern Olympics. But true or false, Kurt? The ancient Olympics never existed. They were fabricated as a marketing stunt to bring attention to the modern Olympics. True or false?
Whoa. Modern Olympics? What do you mean, bro? It's only ever been modern Olympics.
Yeah.
Well, that would be really intriguing to find out, but I gotta say I'm pretty confident that there were some ancient Olympics, so I'm gonna hope that you're just really trying to bluff me, and I'm going with false. I think the ancient Olympics happened.
God, you are the smartest person alive, Kurt. The smartest person I know, because of course, yes, that's true. No, I mean, duh. We have so much evidence, contemporary evidence about the Olympics actually taking place back in the day, because if we didn't, we wouldn't know that athletes used to compete fully naked and doused in olive oil. Like, that's exciting.
Right, that's important information.
That's the Olympics I want to go back to. Because if they weren't real, I'd be more okay with the fact that modern Olympic athletes don't compete in that same way. But since it's not the case, or rather, since the ancient Olympics did happen, I get to live with this disappointment for the rest of my days.
We just want to see some people do some high-level sports, sack out. Or not sack, whatever you got going on. But either way, lots of olive oil. I mean, we know that's for sure.
I want to make sure that our modern athletes are just ready to be fried at any time, right?
They're just missing the breading.
Right. If they were just to be put in a big pan, they would go to a nice crisp golden brown.
Okay, well, that's a sentence I never expected to have it rattling around in my own head, but it's in there now. So I think this is probably as good a point as any to go ahead and move on to our two stories for the day.
Yeah.
And for this first story, Luis, I want to start this off by sending you a picture that depicts a sport I'm guessing you probably don't know about. Could you describe to me what you're seeing in this picture?
Okay. All right. So this is what it seems to be a bit of an etching, right? So an old-timey etching. And we've got some very fancily dressed people. So women in big skirted dresses, men wearing those long socks and nice Revolutionary War style jackets and shoes with buckles. But they are... Okay, so there's pairs of people, right? So there are about 3 pairs of people, and each pair of people is holding what looks to be a big blanket or a big piece of fabric, and a couple of them have them draped down to the ground, and one pair of them has it draped or I guess taut. They have it very, very tightly taut, but I'm seeing, Kurt, that there are like 3 foxes, I guess, running through these. But, oh, wait, no, there are 4 foxes, Kurt, but 2 of them seem to be in midair.
Yeah, the longer you look, the more foxes you see. There's like bunch of foxes just around the picture.
Yeah, there are foxes and people just in midair, just flying with this very fancily dressed committee. It's very, very curious. What's going on, Kurt?
Well, this is a depiction of the sport of fox tossing, Luis. So, in the 16th century, the sport of fox tossing was created and became popular among the aristocracy in parts of the Holy Roman Empire.
Amazing.
Basically in what's modern-day Czech Republic and Germany. And fox tossing, or as it was called in German, Fuchsprellen, was usually done in a walled area or courtyard. Teams of 2 would use a long strip of cloth, usually about 40 centimeters wide, and they would try to throw foxes as high into the air as possible.
Oh God, amazing! Oh, they're just out here, just hurling foxes across the sky.
Just tossing foxes.
Yeah,
dude.
just they're out there.
Now, most teams would be 1 man and 1 woman, like the couples in the picture, but fox tossing could also be done with 2 men. So there would be teams of 2, and they would have this piece of cloth. First, they would lay the cloth on the ground, and then wait for the fox to run over it, and then pull it tight quickly so they can launch the fox in the air as high as possible.
Incredible.
And a lot of times, also like in the picture, teams would stand in a line, so the foxes basically have to run like this gauntlet of people trying to throw them. Ultimately, whichever team manages to throw a fox the highest wins. Now, obviously, this is pretty cruel to the foxes. In fact, they would pretty often die after being thrown too high.
No.
But if you can set aside for a second your feelings for the foxes, this would actually be pretty hilarious to watch. I mean, it's said that expert competitors could regularly throw a fox up to 9 meters or 30 feet in the air. So this would really be genuinely pretty exciting to see.
Kurt, I mean, 30 feet in the air, a fox just going off that distance. Those are heights that a fox should not be seeing. Distances that a fox was not built to see. It's like those videos of people holding up their dogs to see things that they've never seen before, like the inside of their freezer.
Right.
All of a sudden you're having a fox perspective from 30 feet in the air. That's incredible.
Foxes were never meant to go this high.
They were never meant to go this high, but I'm glad they did. I don't know if that's going to get me canceled, but, Kurt, you know this, and then this is probably my biggest red flag, I would say, is that I did grow up going to bullfights, and I do enjoy going to bullfights. And you know that a bull dies in nearly every single one. Sure, there are exceptions where they forgive the bull,
right,
but it's not really a fight. They just ritualistically kill a bull. So, if we're going from animal cruelty to animal cruelty, I don't know if this one's better. I mean, you're not stabbing the foxes, you're just hurling them up in the air, which for me, not only does it seem marginally more humane, but also consider a little funnier, Bullfights, not a lot of room for humor.
Yeah, it's interesting to compare the two because, I like you said, in the bullfight, the bull's going to die pretty much every time.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the odds are on these foxes, but let's say like 50% of them are surviving the fall.
Yeah.
So it would seem like it's a lot better for the foxes. But in my mind, somehow there's a dimension of that, like the bull could theoretically get the matador, and these foxes are just kind of like, get me out of here, and then getting tossed on their way, trying to run off.
Yeah. So we'll let you decide.
We'll
put the burden of responsibility of these animal deaths on your hands, dear listener.
That's so true. Our heads are empty. We couldn't be bothered. So one team in fox tossing that was pretty good at the sport was the husband and wife combo of Amadeus and Anna Marie Mühlberg.
There were teams? My God.
Well, they're married, so I think it would be kind of insulting if one of them went and fox tossed with someone else. I don't know if that'd be considered cheating or not.
What did you do last night, honey? Oh, I definitely did not go fox tossing with Johanna next door.
Come back in covered in fox fur. Your wife has questions.
Whose hair is this? It's just a fox.
Now, at a competition in Dresden in 1737, Amadeus and Anna Marie won by throwing a fox approximately 14 meters or 45 feet in the air. So that's definitely higher than foxes were ever meant to go. I mean, that fox was way up there.
That fox was about to put a flag on the moon.
Amadeus was also given the nickname Amadeus the Robust because he liked to show off by holding the cloth with only one finger and still managing to toss foxes ridiculously high. So he's a real professional here. He's a real gamer.
Do you think, okay, hold on, quick pause. So he was known as the robust because he could lift with just a single finger. Something tells me that he was nicknamed the robust for other reasons, and he tried to better his PR by saying, "Oh no, it's because I can throw with just one finger." Context, everyone. When we were in university, I feel like I was also called the robust several times, and it's not for my ability of fox tossing. Respectfully,
it is unrelated to your fox tossing abilities.
It's not going to
Luis
ruin.
can also toss a fox using only one finger, but it's completely unrelated to that.
Yeah, it's unrelated to me being known as the robust. It's not going to impact my fox tossing career in any way, shape, or form.
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, maybe he had to retcon the reasoning behind Amadeus the robust. But as far as I know,
Probably.
Luis, it was based on this fox tossing maneuver. Now, as fox tossing became more popular, it spread to other areas, including Bohemia and Silesia. This is basically modern day Austria. And as the sport spread to different regions, people made their own additions or changes to it. So there kind of ended up being different versions of fox tossing being played in different places. For example, in Silesia, they played a version where they would incorporate other animals such as badgers, rabbits, wildcats, and on some occasions, even wild boars.
Oh, come on.
Wow, they're really stepping it up a notch here, getting the wild boars involved. I mean, it's one thing to toss a fox, but this is a whole pig with tusks.
That's like fully different sizes, right? Like fully different weights as well. A fox is no bigger than your average, I don't know, Maine Coon cat. So if you're doing different animals, what was it? Rabbits,
badgers, wildcats, and on some occasions wild boars.
Wildcats. I mean, come on. I feel like all of these include different levels of not just difficulty for weight reasons, but difficulty for potential danger reasons. So do you think that maybe there were different fox tossing leagues that each specialize in the different animals, required a different skill level, skill set, right? So, hey, I'm a fox tosser, but exclusively for wildcats. Oh, word? I'm a fox tosser, but exclusively for boars. Yeah, what do you think about that?
Different specializations.
Yeah, it's like you you get your undergrad degree in fox tossing, but your master's degree is specialized in each of these different fields. So you've got these different tiers of fox tossing. So I don't know, and maybe there were some fox tossing purists. Ever thought about this?
Oh wow. I mean, now that you're saying it, I am thinking about like between, badgers, rabbits, wildcats, and foxes. Like these are very different speeds of animals and the way they move and their weight. So it wouldn't be really easy to transition from one to the other. I wonder if there were like whole different strategies depending on what animal it is.
Do you think there were people that would say, "Oh, fox tossing is not what it used to be. They're using boars now." Did you hear? And they were just getting really uppity about it. And on the other end, those that were really good at fox tossing at different levels, they're like, "Oh yeah, this is the wild hare gambit." They would have different strategies, different openers for fox tossing.
I would love to watch a video about the drama between different fox tossing leagues.
Oh yeah.
But unfortunately, I don't know if we have quite that well of documentation on the history.
What are the odds on DraftKings for fox tossing?
So, as you might imagine, thinking about these various animals getting thrown in the air, a lot of them were not very happy to be tossed.
No.
And generally, when they would land, they'd be pretty angry and tend to attack whoever the first person they saw was. So, It wasn't uncommon for people to get injured doing this. And there's also a lot of reports of women having their dresses destroyed after an angry animal got tangled up in it.
God, why would you wear your nice dress to the fox tossing venture?
Because this is a classy sport, Luis, okay?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Whatever.
This is only for the rich people.
Yeah, now, okay. Now us poors can't do fox tossing.
Apparently not. Apparently we've gate-kept fox tossing.
Maybe the communist revolution was good. They bring fox tossing down to the lower class. Come on, we're just stuck using pillowcases and rats.
I know you got to scrounge for those pieces of cloth. But as you saw in the picture I sent you, everyone's wearing nice clothes. I mean, these are all noble people.
Right.
And anybody who wants to see that picture can go check our social medias. We'll have it posted on there so you can see for yourself some very fancy people trying to throw foxes in the air. Now, in 1739, the Duke of Legnica, this is one of the regions of Silesia, invited several notable fox tossers for a gathering and competition.
Yes.
And amongst those invited were Amadeus and Anna Marie Muehlberg.
Yes.
How'd you like to be known across the land as a notable fox tosser? That'd be nice.
I want to be invited to the Fox Tosser convention. They probably have some really cool tote bags they're giving out.
Oh, yeah, the merch is going to be great.
Do you think they had fox tossing influencers? Please, God.
If it is, it's Amadeus the Robust and Anna Marie Muehlberg. Come on.
Of course they are. Of course they are.
So Amadeus and Anna Marie went to the competition at the estate of the Duke of Legnica. Unfortunately, they didn't win the competition, but they did become close friends with the Duke. And so when he decided to have the event again the following year, he again invited them. So in late 1740, Amadeus and Anna Marie arrived at the Duke's estate for a second fox tossing competition. But when they arrived, they found only a few other participants at the estate. So believe it or not, Luis, there were other things going on in the world beyond the wild sport of fox tossing.
I don't want to believe that.
And one of these things was quite a bit of uncertainty and a power struggle over who was going to be the next ruler of the Holy Roman Empire.
Oh, God. Okay.
Now, to make a long story short, because of this uncertainty and potential power vacuum, Frederick the Great, who was the king of Prussia, was preparing to invade Silesia. His troops had been seen encamped on the Prussian side of the Oder River, which was the border between Prussia and Silesia. Now, because of this pending invasion, most of the guests had chosen to stay home, but all of this happened so fast that Amadeus and Anna Marie and a few other guests arrived at the estate before they heard this news. So I would say at this point, it'd probably be smart to just go back home, especially considering that Frederick's troops greatly outnumbered the Silesian troops in the area. Most of Silesia's forces were stationed in other regions, so it doesn't seem like they'll be able to put up much of a fight if there is an invasion.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, Amadeus convinced the Duke and the other guests to go with a different plan. And spoiler alert, Luis, it involves fox tossing.
Duff. Yes.
I mean, what else was it going to be about? Come on.
Yes. Toss those foxes. Toss those foxes.
So both Amadeus and Anna Marie were related to people on the other side of this power struggle. So it's possible that they took this potential invasion a little personally.
Yeah.
Or maybe Amadeus was just Amadeus the Robust and he came to do some fox tossing and he is not going to let anything stop him from that. But either way, the plan that Amadeus convinced the Duke and the other guests to participate in went as follows. In the early hours of the morning, they transported around 55 foxes, 18 badgers, 6 wildcats, and 3 wild dogs to a narrow part of the Oder River directly across from the Prussian camp. And the river had an embankment that was deep enough that if you stood at the bottom, you couldn't be seen from the Prussian camp. Then the 6 guests lined up, including Amadeus and Anna Marie, and formed a fox-tossing gauntlet, so to speak. Then the animals were one by one released, and the guests did their absolute best to toss the animals over the embankment into the Prussian camp. And as you might remember me mentioning before, Luis, these animals were very much not into being tossed. So when they hit the ground, they were presumably extremely aggressive. And this caused a fair amount of confusion and chaos, at least in the area of the camp where these animals were landing in and raining down on people.
This is an incredible strategy, Kurt. I find this one of my favorite things of history is the different style of projectiles that people use in things like trebuchets, catapults, etc. Because, I mean, we've talked about this before, I think, where, you know, people would put corpses and dead bodies riddled with things like leprosy and chuck them over a city's walls in order to commit essentially chemical warfare. And of course the person's dead, right? So once the person lands, okay, you can get rid of it. But my goodness, if you get a wild boar to land in the middle of your town square, that bad boy's gonna wreck some stuff up. Because, dear listener, I don't know if you've ever been nearby a wild hog, but they are ruthless. Kurt, have you been near a wild hog before?
I have not been near a wild hog, but wild hogs are one of the few animals that I'm like, they're the enemy. They are insane. They have no fight or flight reaction. Just fight. Yeah. They're super bloodthirsty. Nothing scares them. They're an absolute killing machine, frankly.
I will say I do very much respect the pig because we somehow managed to domesticate a wild boar. And that is that the fact that wild boars still exist to this day is a great testament to the fact that they were much better than us at certain things.
Seriously. Fun little fast fact here, but the reason why there are pigs in the Americas is because when the Spanish came over to explore, they brought like 30 pigs with them. As soon as they landed, immediately released them into the wild because they knew that pigs could survive in basically any environment and could eat basically any food. So they were like, if we end up being here long term, we'll have a food source that we can hunt. So pigs were just like the go-to animal that they're like, these are domesticated animals and we can release them into any wilderness and they'll procreate without stopping.
They're the real plague. The real plague is just a horde of boars, a boar horde, if you will.
They're the real enemy.
Toss them over the city walls.
Toss them into the Prussian camp.
Toss them all.
We're sending in Swine Team 6. Go.
Good.
So these animals are raining down into the Prussian camp. And on a quick side note here, there could have been a dimension to this plan that it was a way to agitate the Prussian forces without giving them a pretext to declare war, because at this point in time, there hadn't been a formal declaration of war, so maybe they were thinking the invasion could still potentially be avoided. I mean, I don't know if you really would be able to use this as a pretext to declare war or not. It does seem like some form of an attack, but it's like a weird Sun Tzu art of war attack where it's like, make sure you attack in a way that just completely confuses your enemy.
Did Sun Tzu consider swine? Just a thought.
Did Sun Tzu consider pigs flying?
Maybe he should have. Yeah.
Now, according to the few accounts we have from the Prussian side, many of the soldiers woke up to find themselves being bitten by an angry badger or clawed at by a wild cat. And at first they thought these animals might be fleeing some sort of disturbance, such as a large army marching on their position. So the pandemonium pretty quickly intensified as people tried to prepare for an imminent attack. But after some time had passed and it was clear no attack was coming, and also probably after noticing the various dead animals covering one specific part of the river embankment, they realized that this must have been intentionally done. So they determined that this was something between a prank and an attempt at sabotage, but it seems like didn't really conclude further than that. And we don't know if this influenced their decisions, but the Prussian army did in fact invade Silesia the following day and managed to capture a significant amount of territory. Now, luckily for Amadeus and Anne-Marie, they had left by then. Basically, they came, they tossed, and then they went back home. The couple did continue to participate in fox tossing competitions until 1743, when during a competition, a wild boar stabbed its tusk into Amadeus's leg, leaving him partially disabled.
No.
I know, the wild boar thing came back to bite him finally, or stab him, I guess.
You're right.
Fox tossing continued to be popular through the 17th and 18th centuries until it fell out of favor, when it seems people miraculously came to the conclusion that an afternoon of fun wasn't necessarily worth 50 to 100 dead foxes.
Who's to say? Who's to decide what's good society?
Who's to say?
Yeah. Who defines whether or not we can toss foxes 2 stories in the air?
So that story was a little on the short side, I know, but I still think that is a pretty brilliant scheme of a way to, again, both confuse and agitate enemy troops.
I agree.
What do you think of this, Luis? Are you on board with this scheming?
Yeah, I think respectfully to all of those warmongering types around the world, I think we've decided to get boring with it, Okay, guerrilla warfare, yeah, whatever. Sending in special ops teams, sending in special forces to do tactical recon missions. No, that's boring. Okay, just send in all your people and send in like 15 wild boars and get it a little funky with it. Yeah, we've lost the plot a little bit on what warfare should be. Because yeah, of course, war is hell. War never changes. Whatever. But listen, I think a lot of people would probably go to war less around the world if we included an extra layer of confusion and hilarity. Okay, so this is my proposed plan for peace on Earth. Make war unpredictable. Okay?
Yes.
Make war the type of place where if you go to a war zone, you're going to see things you're never going to see again. Right? Because, okay, these days, what do you see in a war zone? Guns and children screaming. You can see that in any U.S. high school. Hold on, sorry. Respectfully. Okay, let me give another example. I don't know, a crime-ridden field in Mexico. There we go. See, I'm attacking both countries, guys.
You're keeping it fair.
Yeah, keeping it fair. I feel like if you go to war and come back and say wild boars rained down from the sky and, impaled my friend to a degree where his injuries were so gangrened he did not survive, no one's going to believe you, right?
Right.
And I think we need to go back to that era where war literally seems like a very confusing, dangerous place to be in. I don't know. I think I've lost the plot now.
All I know is everybody is out here doing guerrilla warfare when what they should be doing is trying to throw guerrillas into the enemy encampment. Okay? Somebody try that out. Let me know how it goes.
That's right. Make guerrilla warfare guerrillas again.
Okay, Luis, so let's go on to our second story. And I want to start this out by talking a little bit about the Medal of Honor. Can you give us a little explanation of what the Medal of Honor is? I assume you know.
Well, it's a video game series.
Okay.
It's a video game franchise, first of all. Yeah, first and foremost. But of course, we know that that's named also after... and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm recalling correctly, it's the medal that's given to a member of the armed forces in the U.S. whenever they've done some sort of heroic act of sacrifice or devotion to their country. Or it's like a medal of heroism, I would say, during warfare.
Yeah, it's the highest award that someone in the military can receive. So the Medal of Honor was first created in 1861 during the American Civil War. And like you were kind of saying, it's awarded for extreme acts of bravery or perseverance. And it's really not given out very frequently. To give some context here, in the Civil War, there were 2 million Union soldiers who served. In World War I, 4.8 million Americans served. World War II, 16 million Americans. In the Korean War, 5.7 million. The Vietnam War, 8.7 million. And if you add all that up, plus some various smaller conflicts that America has been involved in, you get around 41 million Americans who have served in combat since the Medal of Honor was created.
Whoa.
Now, 41 million, but in all that time, only 3,517 medals of honor have been awarded. So it really is a pretty big rarity.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. Do you think I could win a Medal of Honor at some point if I really put my mind into it?
Yeah, go throw some guerrillas into the enemy encampment.
I guess a Medal of Honor is not something that you're like actively seeking out, right? Because that means you're going to have to go through some quite traumatizing situations, no?
Yeah, it's not a consolation prize, but it's like making up for what you've had to live through somewhat.
Yeah. Never mind. I don't want a Medal of Honor anymore.
Well, today, Luis, I'm going to tell you the story of the first recipients of the Medal of Honor. So, like I said, the Medal of Honor was created during the American Civil War. So, of course, that's when this story is going to take place. And we're in the first years of the American Civil War, so the 1860s here.
Good year.
Now, at the beginning of the Civil War, 11 states made up the Confederacy. These are the rebels. Mm-hmm. So the goal of the Union wasn't exactly as simple as capturing the enemy capital or leadership because, you go and capture the enemy capital and the Confederates will just make a different city the capital. This actually happened twice during the war. Same thing goes for capturing or killing Confederate leadership. So the Union's goal was more like isolate and contain the Confederate States, and then slowly start shrinking its territory. And if you think about the means of transportation in 1861, there's not really that many options available. Obviously, armies are going to have to transport ammunition, artillery, food, water, and all kinds of other military supplies. But since cars haven't been invented yet, the best way to do this would be via rivers or railroads. It's 1860, Luis.
Come on. Get it with the times, guys.
Now, as a result, controlling these supply lines became an important strategy for winning the war. So, during the first year of the Civil War, Union forces won significant victories in Tennessee, including capturing the state capital of Nashville. And because most of the railroads connecting the southern states to the northern states passed through Tennessee, this opened up a whole bunch of new strategic targets for the Union. Now, pause here for just a moment so I can introduce our main character of the story, a man named James Andrews. James Andrews actually wasn't a soldier for either side. He was a private citizen originally from Kentucky. And before the war, James worked as a house painter and a singing coach. During the war, he made money by smuggling supplies across enemy lines to the Union forces and also working as a scout for Union Major General Don Buell. General Buell was the Union general who had just captured Nashville. And after this happened, James Andrews had a little bit of a crazy idea. But an idea so crazy that it just might work, Luis. Now, somehow, James had found out out that a train engineer in Atlanta, Georgia was willing to defect to the Union side. Georgia was completely controlled by the Confederacy, but Atlanta was only 250 miles southeast of Nashville and directly connected by railroad. So if James and some others could get to Atlanta and meet the train engineer, they could drive the train all the way back to Nashville, destroying the railroad track behind them, burning bridges, and cutting telegraph lines along the way, which would effectively cripple the Confederacy's transportation and communication. So James approached General Buell with this plan, and Buell approved. General Buell actually didn't stick around to see this happen. He was a little preoccupied with marching his division west to fight in the Battle of Shiloh, which, if you remember from previously mentioned on this podcast, the Battle of Shiloh is where the legend of glowing bacteria healing soldiers and the angel's glow totally did not happen at. That's just a little note.
Right, yeah.
James enlisted 8 men from another Union division in Tennessee, led by General Ormsby Mitchell. James and his men then made their way to Atlanta. However, when they arrived in Atlanta, they discovered the train engineer had been relocated to a different station. So, not off to a great start here.
Seeing the plans slowly melt away.
Yeah. James asked the men if any of them knew how to drive a train, and none of them did.
Sick.
And in addition to this, Confederate soldiers caught 2 of the men trying to cut telegraph lines. Luckily, these 2 men pretended to be disgruntled, overworked wiremen, and it seems the soldiers believed this, so they didn't think anything of it. But obviously, this plan was not going to happen, so James called it off and everyone returned to Tennessee. Now, despite his failure, James wasn't ready to give up. He came up with a new plan. And to understand this new plan, which I guess is more like a variation of the old plan, let me give a little context of what exactly was happening at that moment. So, after capturing Nashville, one of the main targets of the Union Army, and specifically General Ormsby Mitchell, was the town of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Chattanooga was in between Atlanta and Nashville, and was one of the major railroad stops in Tennessee, but it was pretty heavily fortified by Confederate forces. Now, usually when trying to invade somewhere, the Union would follow these 3 steps. First, they would surround the target and cut off supply lines. Then they would bombard the enemy with artillery. And finally, they would invade and capture the target. But the problem with this was that Chattanooga had the Tennessee River on its northern border and the mountains on its eastern border. And this combined with the fact that General Mitchell had a limited number of troops made surrounding Chattanooga basically impossible. If they tried to directly invade, that also would be a disaster because Chattanooga was directly connected to Atlanta by railroad. So once the Union attacked, the Confederates in Chattanooga would only have to hold them off until the reserve troops would arrive from Atlanta and then significantly outnumber the Union troops. Now, this is where James' plan comes in. So James and some others could commandeer a train somewhere between Atlanta and Chattanooga, then ride back to Chattanooga, destroying the rails and bridges and cutting telegraph lines along the way. And at the same time, General Mitchell's forces would invade Chattanooga and defeat the Confederate forces before they could realize they'd been cut off. Now, unsurprisingly, all of the men from the first train raid refused to go again. They'd gotten their fill of failed plans here. So instead, they got new people. 20 Union soldiers volunteered, as well as 1 civilian. To avoid raising suspicion, they split up into groups of 2 and traveled to Marietta, Georgia, where they met up on April 10th at midnight. 2 of the men somehow got delayed, so instead they joined a Confederate artillery unit, pretending to be Confederate soldiers. This was the backup plan for some reason if you didn't make it to the meeting point on time. Now, because trains didn't have dining cars at this point in time, train routes had scheduled stops for riders to get food and water while the train refueled. I know, isn't that barbaric? What do you do on the train? Just look out the window?
Come on, no dining cars?
No dining cars.
Stop this, man.
But so at one of these stops, this is where James Andrews and his raiders decided they would commandeer a train. They chose a stop just north of Atlanta in a town called Big Shanty.
Ooh.
And they chose this stop because it was one of the few stops without a telegraph office. Now, on April 12th, 1862, a train called the General stopped at Big Shanty so train guests could eat breakfast at the Lacey Hotel. Andrews and his men disconnected the passenger cars from the General and rode off with the locomotive, this is the main car in the front, as well as 3 boxcars. The train conductor, who was a man named William Fuller, and 2 other men started chasing after them. And at first they were literally just running after the train on foot, but a little way down the tracks they found a work crew using a handcar and took the handcar from them to continue chasing after the train. Luis, I think you know handcar is like the thing that's, a little platform and it's got like the seesaw thing that 2 guys can pump up and down to try to go after them. So they're not really super fancy here, but they're giving it a good try.
It's what I like to call my dream vehicle, Kurt. I don't know about you. A lot of people fantasize about things they saw in their youth and hyperfixate on them as they grow older. Some people, it's like quicksand. Some people, it's like piranhas and their danger. For me, it's just riding one of those hand cars That's probably, if I ever get to do that, Kurt, it's going to be the happiest day of my life.
Well, as you know, Luis, a handcar needs 2 people to work. So answer me this. Picking out of anyone dead or alive, who would you want your handcar partner to be?
Muammar Gaddafi.
Wow, I really thought it was going to be Maximilian, but somehow you managed to surprise me there. Okay, I'm not going to touch that one anymore. You and Muammar Gaddafi can ride off on your handcart.
I'm not doing it happily, Kurt. I'm not enjoying this cart ride. I just think it'd be interesting to talk about.
Just be interesting conversationist. Okay.
Yeah. It'd be curious. Like I'm not enjoying it, guys.
You're just contractually obligated to operate this handcar with Muammar Gaddafi. This isn't by choice.
Yeah, I didn't have a choice. The genie said to bring back some person from the dead, and he brought Muammar Gaddafi. Might as well enjoy it.
So you would think that there's obviously no way that 2 people on a handcar are going to be able to catch up to a train.
Not with that attitude.
But at this point in history, U.S. trains only traveled at an average speed of 15 miles per hour or 24 kilometers per hour. So they're not really going that fast.
Ugh,
and also, don't forget, James is planning on stopping frequently to destroy bridges and cut telegraph lines. So it turns out that William and his handcar actually have a pretty good chance of catching up to them.
Yeah.
Now, even worse for James getting away, because there's only one train line going north and south, there's designated spots where trains have to pull off to the side rail to let other trains pass going the opposite way. So in some places there would be like a little separate, I guess, shoulder rail that you can get out of the way. So if there's a train going south, you don't collide into each other.
Right.
So even if James and his raiders managed to get somewhere early, they would still have to stick to the train schedule and pull over to wait for trains to pass them in the opposite direction. Now, as they traveled, James would periodically stop the train to cut telegraph lines or tear up railroad track with a crowbar. At one point, they passed a train called the Yonah, and it was pulled over on a side rail waiting to carry workers to a nearby iron factory. Andrews considered stopping to try to disable the Yonah, but decided that it would be too time-consuming and draw too much attention, so they continued on. Whenever they would pass through a station, James would tell the station master that he had special orders from Confederate General Beauregard to transport ammunition to the troops in Chattanooga, and since the telegraph lines to the south had already been cut, the station masters were completely unaware that this was a stolen train and would let Andrews pass without any issue.
Incredible. No one ever thought of this.
It's the perfect crime, frankly.
For the perfect crime.
Now, this worked until the general stopped at a station in Kingston, Georgia. Because Kingston was closer to Chattanooga, the station masters had been given specific instructions to prioritize trains coming south from Chattanooga. And these trains were evacuating people out of Tennessee since it seemed like the Union forces were preparing to invade because, remember, the invasion happening at the same time as part of the plan here.
Yeah.
But because of this, the station master at Kingston wasn't interested in James' story about transporting ammunition because he had already received super specific instructions via the still intact telegraph lines in northern Georgia. So this resulted in James and his raiders being delayed in Kingston, waiting for trains to pass for over an hour. Now, meanwhile, William Fuller, the train conductor, was still chasing after James on his handcar. When he reached the Yonah train, he took it and continued chasing after James. And finally, he reached the station in Kingston literally just moments after James and his raiders had pulled out of the station. At Kingston, Fuller switched to a different train called the William R. Smith and continued pursuing them. After several miles, Fuller reached a section of track that had been destroyed by Andrews' raiders, so he left the train and continued on foot. Then further down the track, he found a train called the Texas, and it seems that James Andrews had successfully convinced the conductor of the Texas to pull over to the side rail so the general could pass with its important cargo for General Beauregard. But William Fuller found the Texas still pulled over on the side rail, and it was facing the wrong direction to follow the general because it had been traveling south. But this is no problem for William. He commandeered the train and began driving it backwards to continue chasing Andrews' raiders. Now, because of William's persistence, he managed to stay only a few moments behind the general, and this meant that Andrews' raiders didn't have time to stop and destroy any more rail because since they were only a few men equipped with just a crowbar, it was a pretty time-consuming process. To make matters worse, it had rained recently, so all the wooden bridges they were planning to burn were too wet to burn quickly, and so the two trains sped through stations at Dalton and Tunnel Hill, with William Fuller still driving backwards. Andrews' raiders were able to briefly stop to cut telegraph lines, but at one of the stations, William Fuller managed to send a telegraph to Chattanooga warning about the stolen train just before the lines were cut. So the cat's out of the bag now.
come on.
And then finally, just 18 miles south of Chattanooga, the general ran out of fuel, and James Andrews and his raiders fled on foot. The Union forces were unable to take Chattanooga and eventually withdrew. Honestly, it was not really much of a battle. There was only a total of 88 casualties on both sides, and James and his raiders did a moderate amount of damage to the Confederate transportation and communication lines, but because William Fuller had stayed close behind them, the damage nearing Chattanooga was basically non-existent. So, kind of mixed results from this.
Yeah.
Within 2 weeks, James Andrews and his raiders had all been captured by Confederate forces, and this included the 2 men who had been late to the meeting point and instead snuck into a Confederate artillery unit. The raiders were all charged with, quote, acts of unlawful belligerency. James stood trial in Chattanooga and was executed by hanging. 7 other raiders were tried in Knoxville and also hung. And then, at this point, the remaining 14 raiders assumed it was only a matter of time before they would be hung, so they made an escape attempt. 8 of them were successful. Of the escapees, 6 traveled hundreds of miles north back to Union lines, while 2 of them floated down the Chattahoochee River through Georgia until they came out in the Gulf of Mexico and were rescued by a Union ship. And then the remaining 6 prisoners who failed to escape were later traded for Confederate POWs. In 1863, the 6 surviving raiders were given the newly created Medal of Honor in Washington, D.C., and afterwards met with President Abraham Lincoln.
Wow.
Then years later, 13 of the raiders who had been executed were posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. And finally, on July 3rd, 2024, President Joe Biden awarded the Medal of Honor to the descendants of 2 more raiders who had been executed.
Whoa.
So ultimately, Luis, only 3 people who were involved in this did not receive any award. Now, one of them was one of the raiders who had snuck into the Confederate artillery unit, but for some reason, the other guy who didn't make the meeting point and snuck into the artillery unit got the medal, so I don't really know what's going on there.
He was better looking.
Something. The one civilian who volunteered, William Campbell, wasn't eligible for a medal because he hadn't served in the army. And guess who else wasn't eligible, speaking of this? James Andrews. Remember, he was just a civilian.
Oh.
Apparently, orchestrating 2 train heists to try to turn the tide of the war doesn't mean anything if you're not enlisted in the army.
It's all just this bureaucracy of the U.S. just lining up for all of us. We can't escape it. We can't run.
He missed out on a technicality.
How is this guy being remembered instead of a Medal of Honor? Just 2 idiots in a podcast in 2024.
Well, I will say lastly, he did make his mark on history a little more than that, because after this happened, the Great Locomotive Chase of 1862, as it came to be known, became a famous event nationwide.
Oh.
Buster Keaton's silent film, The General, is loosely based on this heist.
Okay.
And in 1956, Disney released a film called The Great Locomotive Chase that was about the raid. And finally, every year since 1979, the town of Adairsville, Georgia, this is where William Fuller started driving the train backwards, has a 3-day festival in October called the Great Locomotive Chase Festival, which honestly I would really love to attend. I want to know what's going on at the festival in honor of the train heist.
Oh, Kurt, we need to take this podcast abroad. We need to record a show at this specific place.
Live from the Great Locomotive Chase Festival. That would be wild.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So, how'd the war end? Confederates win?
I don't know. I didn't read that far ahead.
Gotcha. Yeah, you tell me. I didn't do my due diligence. You didn't even know who won the Civil War, Kurt. Wow.
Well, for all you know, Luis, this is a fake story. Maybe the American Civil War never happened. Maybe I made it all up.
Oh my God, a hoax. It's the weirdest conspiracy theory to ever exist. Civil War did not exist. Forget the lost cause myth. This is just the Civil War myth.
The lost myth
never happened.
Forget the cause. It's just lost. That'd be a true Luis guess to guess one of the stories false on the basis that the American Civil War didn't happen, and then you'd totally end up being right. I hate to bring this up so far from the episode that it was in, but you once based your guess on the year that the book Horton Hears a Who came out, which you were wrong about, by the way, but did successfully guess the false story with that information.
Listen, Kurt, it's what we in the business call an educated guess, Kurt.
So what do you think, Luis? We got a couple examples of, people doing some wartime schemes. Could you see yourself participating in either one of these? You made a pretty good case before for make warfare weird again. Is this weird enough for you here?
Yeah, this is weird. Yeah, I think these days we also are not seeing heists.
That's true. Bring back the heists.
If there's anything, okay, we live in a world these days where we're constantly under surveillance, right? And we've just fully accepted this. That's fine. We can solve a lot more crimes now, which is just, I think, a net plus for society. But a lot of the things that we could be getting away with funny things like Heist greatly depend on having a single means of communication and a single means of being able to disrupt that communication. We don't have that anymore. So yeah, I think we're on the borderline of reaching maximum tomfoolery in warfare. I think tomfoolery and shenanigans ended around First World War.
When they had the horses wearing gas masks, that was the last good shenanigan.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, they did get away with some tomfoolery in this First World War, like horses with gas masks. But beyond that, we didn't get a whole lot. There was just a lot of death and destruction, etc. And Trenchfoot is not funny.
Trenchfoot will put a stop to the shenanigans real quick. That is true.
Yeah, yeah. Imagine the world we'd be if we never invented Trenchfoot.
So I'm trying to think how you could combine these two schemes. I've come up with two options here. Maybe you want to cast the deciding vote. So on one hand, I'm like, okay, we steal the train. Remember, they have 3 box cars, like cargo cars.
Yeah.
Fill it up with wild animals, and we just like toss them out the side as we go by, scatter the whole South with angry badgers.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, I'm like, they wanted to go all the way to Chattanooga, and they ran out of fuel. And I wonder if that was like part of the plan, or was it because the guy was so close behind him, or what?
Yeah.
But maybe before we run out of fuel next time, we lay a 40-centimeter wide piece of cloth along the train tracks, and then launch that bad boy the remaining 18 miles.
Ooh, that's nice.
We get like a gauntlet of people ready to throw a little train tossing.
Yeah.
That they will never see coming. I mean, you think they're startled by a runaway train cutting telegraph lines? Wait till they've got a train raining down on them, full of wild badgers.
Just an extra plus of wild badgers. But alternatively, Kurt, have you considered that they could just tie all these wild boars, badgers, and foxes to the front of the train, toss them onto the front of the train, and as soon as they land, they'll go crazy and start running. They can all pull the train together all the way to Chattanooga.
Oh, they pull the train.
Yeah. You idiot. You didn't think of this?
That's kind of brilliant, because I feel like, okay, I'm like the station master, and I get over the telegraph line.
Yeah.
Stolen train. I'm like, all right, I'm ready. I'm going to get this train. Then you see a train being pulled by 86 wild badgers. I mean, you're not going to be able to react. You're frozen in that moment.
That's what it takes.
Do you run towards the badger-filled train? Do you run away? Do you watch in awe? That could have really turned the tide of the war.
Then you've got a defense strategy. If anyone's like saying anything, you just cut the ropes and let the badgers off. Listen, Kurt, the Confederates should have had me on their side.
That would have won him the Medal of Honor, I think.
To the Badgers.
Yeah, the Badgers would have gotten it.
The Badgers would have had Medal of Honor. Oh, man, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for putting that image in my head.
Yeah, you're so welcome. It's just that and fox tossing. We got a wild Sunday going on here.
Yeah, right.
So, people listening to this, if you take away anything from this podcast, if you learn anything from the absolute nonsense we're saying, it's that if you ever get to make a secret plan, make sure you incorporate wild animals, badgers or wild hogs in there somehow. There's just no way it doesn't make it better.
Yeah.
I mean, take any plan you have. This is my plan for how I'm going to save money this month. Yeah. And also it involves throwing a gorilla into someone's yard. It's just better. I'm sorry. It's just objectively better.
And think about this. Like, these days, there are not a lot of wild animals as there used to be, say, 150 years ago, right? So
because we tossed so many of them, they all died.
Because we tossed all of them. So seeing a wild animal these days, it's novelty. It's a novelty. And not only that, but you get the opportunity to toss them as well. So it's a double whammy.
Win-win, frankly.
It's a win-win for everyone involved. Yeah.
Except the fox.
That's right. Okay. All right.
Well, Luis, we've covered some pretty wild wartime schemes here. I think are you ready to start deciphering some truth from lies? Unfortunately, one of these schemes, as we know, is not going to end up actually having happened.
Yeah.
But as always, we must do our duty and decipher truth from lies here.
Sadly.
I
want both of these to be real so bad. I seriously want these stories to be real. With that, Kurt, I think it's time to go to our least favorite part of the show, which of course is deliberation.
Before I tell you the two stories here, I just want to throw out that, for people following this podcast, you might know that Luis is winning by a pretty good margin right now.
Yeah.
And so, Luis, while you're thinking and making your decisions, just factor into this that at a certain point here, I'll be losing so bad that I'll be forced to shower you with angry wild animals. So, if you think you're going to guess the true story, I don't know, just consider you might be moving yourself one step closer to an angry badger in your house. Just saying.
You say that as if it were something I was not excited for. Come on.
I could not possibly comprehend your goals.
Yeah, no, I live by myself, Kurt. Sometimes it gets real lonely and real boring, honestly. If someone were just to release a wild boar, a wild hare into my tiny closet of an apartment, I think that would be a really fun Tuesday.
Somebody throw an angry wildcat at me just so I can feel something. For crying out loud, please.
It's been a sad couple of months.
All right, Luis. So let me give you a little reminder of these two stories. So first, I told you about the sport of fox tossing and the scheme by Amadeus the Robust and Anna Marie Muhlenberg to agitate the Prussian forces in the most hilarious way possible. And then I told you about the great locomotive chase of 1862, where James Andrews and his raiders not once but twice attempted to steal a train, once successfully, I guess, and did a little damage on their way, but ultimately apparently not enough to win a medal. What do you think?
Oh man, I don't know, man. It's a difficult one because okay, let me start with fox tossing. The fact that you send me an etching, it adds a lot of validity to this story, and I love a funny story. I love just to picture a fox 50 feet in the air. That's just very funny to me. So that's a lot of validity. And we have had some sort of precedence throughout history, as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, of throwing a corpse riddled with disease over your opponent's walls in order to distract them, confuse them, etc.
Sorry to interrupt. Step 1, give the foxes leprosy. Step 2, toss them into the Prussian camp. Hang on.
Hold on.
We hadn't even considered this.
Whoa.
Where's the leprous foxes?
Once again, they should have had us in their war council back in the day. Imagine what are we doing here with a liberal arts college degree?
What are we
doing?
We
could be advising some king with their siege tactics.
Exactly.
That's what I always say. Now I see this happening again. We do have some sort of precedent about this, of tossing animals and other objects that are not necessarily just rocks into your enemy's territory. However, I'm finding this very difficult to believe, especially I have a feeling that wrangling up foxes and wrangling up wild boars is not a silent task, right? You cannot stealthily gather the 5 wild boars, I'd argue. And this is both from the boar side or the people side. So in order to, I feel like once, if you're in an encampment, in an enemy encampment, and you just hear from the other side of the river just squeals and yells and squeaks of a fox, you'd probably either A, go investigate, or B, leave, So that's my first thought. Secondly, this story gives me the feeling that you know me a lot, very well. And you know that I love this kind of story. And this is a story that I would be very happy listening to and also telling. So it's reminding me of a story, I'd say. So that's what's keeping me on the line. On the other hand, the story about the Medal of Honor, not only did a lot of silly stuff happen during the U.S. Civil War, a lot of really just out there things. So I do not mistrust the telling of the wild, great American train chase, because of course it's something that would happen. And of course the only way that people move around is trains. And of course there's a single telegraph line that is able to be cut and completely leave Chattanooga or wherever we were in the darkness. And not just that, but respectfully, Kurt, the U.S. absolutely loves to do random symbolic things. So I would not be surprised if Joe Biden as president said, oh, hey, I'm going to give a Medal of Honor to the families of this guy that just did a train chase. That's just something the U.S. would do to distract from something else going on in their country.
By the way, July 3rd, 2024. It was like a month ago.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, you're right. No. And the worst part is that the U.S. would do this to distract the country of something else, and yet it did not come into my radar, right? So the U.S. is great at doing these empty platitudes. So I think you can see where this is going, Kurt. I have a feeling fox tossing is fake, and then the wild, great American train chase is the real story. So that's what I'm going to stick with for today. final answer.
Well, it really is a Luis story now that I'm thinking about it, because, we got the oddness of fox tossing, and we're in medieval Europe.
Yeah.
Even we got a little mention of the Holy Roman Empire in there a couple times.
Habsburgs.
So, yeah, it is really a story tailor-made for you. And as usual, Luis, you're spot on. It is unfortunately false. Now, we do have some silver lining here, at least. Fox tossing was a real sport practiced in Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries. I guess that's good or bad, depending on if you're thinking about it from the fox's perspective or not. And additionally, Frederick the Great of Prussia did invade Silesia because of political uncertainty, but other than that, it is completely made up. Unfortunately, no Amadeus the Robust, no scheme to throw wild animals into enemy encampments. Although I will tell you, interestingly, that there were versions of this sport played where they used other animals, and on at least one or two occasions, wild boars, and apparently even wolves at least once as well. So people were really hitting the gas pedal on this thing. They were like, what's the biggest animal that we can toss without anybody dying? Or at least anybody dying too frequently.
So there was JV and varsity fox tossing? That's incredible.
Yeah, I don't know if it was like there's different leagues of it. I kind of get the sense that it might have been like, we're having a fox tossing competition. Come show up. And then they just released the boars in there and they're like, toss or die.
Or you just show up, someone organizes a fox tossing tournament and they just specify in their invitation, we came across a pack of wolves and somehow secured 4 of them. Please come. It'll be fun. That's incredible. Oh, that's lovely. This reminds me when people defend bullfighting here, it's a very, very contentious topic here in Mexico and across the world, of course. But when people try to defend bullfighting, they tend to revert back to something along the lines of, it's tradition, it's culture, bro. It's something we've been doing for years. I wonder if there are any fox tossing apologists that are trying to bring it back. And when met with any sort of feedback, they're like, guys, this is my culture. This is just, you wouldn't get it. This is something that you need to grow up with to really appreciate the nuances of fox tossing.
Well, I'm generally pretty okay with bullfighting because I do feel like if you're a vegetarian, that's a different thing. But if you're willing to eat a steak but not willing to watch bullfighting, I think maybe your problem is just like having to see the thing happen.
Yeah.
But you know what? This maybe has swayed my opinion because now I'm like, if they really wanted to get in there and be manly about it, they'd be trying to toss this bull, okay? I'm no longer impressed by bullfighting. I want to see somebody try to throw this bad boy.
Yeah, I want to see air.
Let's see what that matador cape can really do.
Yeah, I want to see air. I mean, it's a 500 kilo animal, so it's a half a ton of it's a car, right? It's a small car.
Yeah, it's like gonna take someone with the nickname the Robust to pull this thing off for sure. It's not for everybody, but I'll definitely pay good money to see a bull go 30 feet in the air.
Hey, so International Association of Bullfighters and Matadors, get on it. We know you listen to this podcast.
Well, at least we had a lot of fun, but as usual, no points for me, more points for you, bringing us to 7-2 on the score. And you think that maybe was an idle threat, Luis, but I'm telling you, get ready for the reigning Badgers. It's coming. You're really pushing me here.
I know. Kurt, I laid out the cloth right ahead of you, and you walked right into it, and you were 30 feet up in the air.
I've been tossed. Now I feel for the foxes.
You've been tossed.
When they tossed the foxes, Luis, I said nothing. When they tossed the wild boars, I said nothing. Now I have been tossed.
I voted for the fox tossing party, not realizing they would toss me. Ridiculous.
Oh, exactly. Well, if you guys would like to see some fun pictures of fox tossing, be sure to check out our social medias. We'll post a picture that Luis looked at, as well as some other great images of people tossing foxes. We're on Instagram at UnbelievablePod and Twitter at UnbelievablePC. And remember, everyone, if you got a scheme, add some animal throwing into it too, okay? I'm telling you, when there's a wild cat flying through the air as part of the plan, it's going to make it better. You don't believe me? Go try it. Bye, everyone.
See ya.